All right, welcome everyone. We're back for another episode of the Flow Show. It's number 203. We got a very special guest today. My man Nick Wright joins us. Nick, how are you?
I'm good. It's been too long. Sorry, you and I were supposed to do this months ago, and then life got in the way. So I'm glad we're finally connecting.
All right, listen, you got 3 kids. I got 2 kids. We're doing stuff. You got
Yeah.
a very busy schedule, and I really do appreciate the time. I know how it is, so I appreciate that.
Of course.
So poker, we're going to talk about that. I know you play poker. We've run each other at events like Bahamas for the WSOP, and I know we're gonna cover all that. But for those that may not be as familiar with you, maybe give a little background, kind of what you do with
Oh,
the
sure.
first things first and your show and sort of your background.
Yeah. So what I do now is Monday through Friday on FS1. You can see me host First Things First. So we talk about everything in the sports world, but the vast majority is the NFL and the NBA. And that show's been going on now, my goodness, for 7.5 years. It's me, Kevin Wildes, Chris Broussard. We're on right after Colin Cowherd on FS1. And then I host my own podcast / YouTube show with my son, actually. That is a little more gambling than the TV show and a little more of our lives, but it's still sports focused. And so, yeah, so that's what I do now. The very short version of my kind of biography is I'm from Kansas City. I went to Syracuse. I then, after college, did radio in Kansas City for 5 years, then radio in Houston for 4 years, and have been working for Fox doing TV for the last, now 8 years. And I've been hosting First Things First for the last 7.
That's awesome. Yeah, I gotta try to understand. I did follow along, looked at your path, and you obviously been in this industry and doing this for so long. When you get to kind of put in the time and work, you're doing something you love and passionate about, and then all of a sudden you get to be on kind of national television, have this show come to life. What is that like? Can you tell me about that experience where you get told, hey, like now you're in Kansas City, you're doing local radio, now all of a sudden they bring you in a major network comes to you. How does that?
Sure.
Do you shop it? Do they come to you? Is it a little both?
Well, so yeah, my path is kind of a unique one. So my career goal from being a kid really was to be the biggest sports radio guy in the world. So
Okay.
I grew up as the last real job I had was in high school delivering. I was a door-to-door steak salesman.
Mhm.
One of those guys knocked on your door and
Steak, like meat.
yeah, one of those
Yeah.
guys that's like, oh man, the freezer in my truck broke down, and I got to get rid of these steaks. Like, I can get them to you for a great deal. Just cold calling. That was
Oh,
the
wow.
last. That was the last actual job I had, because I
Okay.
don't consider what I do now a real job. And I would drive around, and one of the reasons I liked that job was because I'd listen to Jim Rome all 3 hours.
Mhm.
And then I got to college right around the time Colin Cowherd was having his ascent on ESPN radio. And I was like, well, this is the best guy to ever do it. And I just said, this is definitively what I want to do. And I did radio in college. I created What's Right with Nick Wright when I was in college. And then coming out of college, I was very fortunate. I had 2 job offers. I had an offer at ESPN Radio in New York City, a full-time job to be a producer with benefits, a real job. And then I had an offer in Kansas City for literally $8 an hour to be part-time and being the morning news producer on a conservative like in the morning they did actual news, and then they did like conservative Rush Limbaugh bullshit after.
Mhm.
But that job included on Saturdays, I got to host my own show for 4 hours.
Okay.
And I took that job instead of the one at ESPN in New York because I wanted to be on the air. And I did weekends, then nights, then middays, then afternoons in Kansas City over the course of 5 years. And then I got the job in Houston. And I had done the job in Houston for 3 years and then added a weekend national show and got a little national fill-in work. I filled in for Jim Rome, which was like the dream, so things are going kind of tracking correctly.
Right.
But I didn't love Houston. I didn't love Texas. and my wife's family's from California. And so I, on my own, went out to California. I had set up meetings with the heads of Fox Sports Radio, which is based in California. They also have a massive. Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't want to. Sorry, I guess that's a very so curious about it. So, did you have a team? Like when you say you're reaching out, doing meetings, do you have a manager? Do you have an assistant?
No.
How are you doing that?
Oh no! At this point in time, so that's a good question because it's kind of funny. When I was in Kansas City, I looked up who Colin Cowherd's agent was. And it was a guy named Nick Khan, who now runs the WWE, is one of the biggest power brokers in media, and a guy that I am now fortunate enough to have a relationship with. I looked up who his agent was, and I knew someone who knew him, was like, hey, again, I'm in Kansas City at this point in time. I have just signed my first contract. This is 2010. And that first contract was for $23,800 a year. So it's not that long ago and it's no money.
Right.
And I'm like, can you get me on the phone with Nick Khan? I want to pitch him that he should represent me. He represents the biggest people in the world.
Right. Yep.
And the guy I talked to was like, I can get you on the phone with him and he might represent you, but you would literally be, by a factor of a lot, his least important, you know what I mean? Like he's got a lot of, he said, so, there's other agencies that kind of more specialize in ascending broadcasters, whatever it is. And so he's like, I can give you the phone numbers for whomever. So I ended up not calling Nick. I called a guy named Josh Santry, who was working for a place called If Management. And my pitch was, you don't represent Colin Cowherd, but if you want to represent the next Colin Cowherd, you'll take me on. And I met with them and they did. And so I'm in Kansas City at that time. The Houston job I heard about because a friend of mine from college was working there and he knew their morning guy was leaving to go be the full-time voice of the Houston Texans. Yep. So I called that job. I called that guy and said, I know you have a job coming open. It should be me. And
this is like the Brady Kraft thing. You literally said this is going to be the best decision you make. I don't know
if I said it's going to be the best decision, but I said hey, here's who I am. Here's my tape. And, I knew that in order. At that point in time, and if I'm going on too long on any of this, tell me.
I love it. This is what I like to hear and learn.
So at that point in time, it was like a very fork in the road moment. So now we're in 2012 in Kansas City. And I don't want to sound, I'll show you something. I'll take it off the wall.
Yeah.
Hold on. I have this framed thing right here. So this says, what's wrong with Nick Wright? And this is an article that our version of like the Alt Weekly. So every city has one, Village Voice, what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kansas City wrote an article about how this guy who was on the second tier sports station in Kansas City has, is announced to the world, I'm going to become the biggest sports talk guy in the city. And then that is just step one. Right. And at that point in time, I'm on the second-rate station and don't have good ratings. And the gist of this article is that I'm delusional. The gist of the article is there is a crazy person on the radio in Kansas City. Right. But now so this article was written, let me just see, so March of 2011. So now we're into 2012 and I've done the Kansas City piece. Okay. I have beaten the Heritage Station. I'm the, not sound like an asshole, but I'm the biggest guy in town. Yeah. The fork in the road was, I can stay here forever. This is where I'm from. This is where my dad is. This is where I met my now wife at that point in time, fiance. And it's pretty good life. Like being, you know what I mean? It's like big fish, small pond, know everyone. But then I won't ever see if I could do what I said I wanted to do. And I knew in order to do that, I had to get to a major market.
Yep.
And so the Houston thing, I hear about it. I pitch them. They know a little bit about me. they bring me down for an interview. And I knew that Texas is very territorial. And with any local radio, the concern about hiring any outsider is it's a call-in show. And someone's going to reference Earl Campbell and the Houston Oilers. And you're going to say, who's that? And that the audience is immediately you're going to lose credibility.
Yep.
So I made a handwritten, color-coded 20-page Houston sports encyclopedia that I then had bound into a book, basically, and brought with me to the interview. I still have it.
That's amazing.
It took probably 30, 40 hours in the 5 days between when I heard they were flying me in for the interview and when I got there. So, like, at the interview, I slid it across the table like, hey, I know it, you guys haven't said it, but I know what your biggest concern would be. You don't have to worry about that with me. And I got the gig.
I mean, it sounds like the quote, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. It seems like you're pretty prepared. And
I mean, I still talk about it this day. It's 10 years ago. I'm very proud of that. And that work I put in at that moment changed the trajectory of my life. And so then I'm in Houston and I don't love it. My wife and kids like it. I don't love it. I made a strategic error broadcasting in Houston, which was at this point, it's so tragic. There's been so many you can't. Oh, I know exactly what it was. Because never mind. I do know. After Sandy Hook, I went on the air and, announced myself essentially as the grab up the guns liberal. And that's actually not a terrible error if you will then own it. But I then got such immediate pushback and I was so anxious about the text line and everyone being like, you Yankee pansy, that I then...
Because this is when you're in Houston.
I'm in Houston.
I mean, yeah, which is, I actually, it's funny because I spent a couple good years of my life too. I had a similar thing. I had a choice to stay in Houston or not. There was a really great poker cash game there running twice a week. I would fly in and I get it. But that is like the gun probably capital of the country, right? That is like everyone's got a gun. You at their house, in their car, in their backpack, like that. So yeah, that is definitely a
and here's the thing. I think I could have been okay if I had done that, but I did the worst thing possible, which is I did that and then I kind of ran from it. I got scared. And it's the only time in my broadcasting career I've kind of done that. And now it's the worst of both worlds because the people who would have supported you, because even in Texas, there are a lot of people that agree with you. You're not getting them. And the people who, you know what I mean, who you alienated, you've lost them. And for the first time in my career, I was like, oh, this could go sideways on me. Plus, I don't love it here. Plus, my wife wants to be in California eventually. I need to make a jump. So that brings me to 4 years into my time in Houston. I had signed a new contract and I negotiated an out for national radio.
What year? Right? What year was that when you were leaving Houston?
I was there from 12 to 16. So this is now, this is probably the winter of 15. That is when it is. It's late.
That was the peak. I from like late 12 to like around 15, 16. I probably was there twice a week or sometimes weeks at a time in Houston. So we were in the same. We probably passed each other.
I was going to say because I played poker in Houston, but I didn't have any money really, so we probably were playing in different games. But and now Houston's got a great card room.
It's crazy what's going on. It's crazy. The poker in Texas is out of control. I mean, there's a lodge in Austin and this and that and the opening. And I know Doug Polk just did the Dallas thing, didn't quite work out at the moment, but they're trying it. I mean, it does seem like poker is, we're going to spend some time on poker, but this to me, this is stuff I love. I love hearing this because I think this is like for people I think this is so relatable and so many people that have like these inflection points or like big decisions to either kind of be safe or go for it. Or, whether it's in a media or a dream of something or a job or a taking, because it's uncomfortable. Safe is great, right? It's hard to you have family, you have kids, you have stuff that depends on you. So it's a lot. It is a lot of pressure, and
it's a lot, deal. And it's just it's also what do what do you really want? What do you like? I don't think I have always done everything that makes. I don't think I've prioritized necessarily happiness the way I should have. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I don't want to say the way I should have, but the way maybe would have been smarter. Like a lot of these decisions didn't lead to the most anxiety free, you know what I mean?
For sure.
Present for my kids, all these things that are valuable. Because I'm chasing this very specific goal, right? Um, so we're now in the winter of 2015, and I am like, okay, I think it's time to make a, potentially make a move. And so I set up. So this is I set up meetings with the head of Fox Sports Radio, the head of ESPN Radio LA, those two guys, and I go to both of them, and I'm like, hey, I'm better than this specific show you have on the air.
Mhm.
And I guarantee I'm less expensive. Fox Sports Radio, I remember vividly. It was a guy named Mike North and somebody else. It was the morning show. It was the worst sports radio show in America. I don't feel badly saying that. And I know that those guys between them were making like 700 grand. And I'm like, I make 100 grand in Houston. You,
Yep.
you give me one of their salaries and you'll have a double better show, whatever it is. And
How do you other than like they can look at your work and these guys have this show somehow that's not great for whatever reason they get on there. What do you do to like to sort of solidify or to show them or present it in a way where they
so
like
at this point, those guys knew me because they had
yeah.
used me to fill in on their network, and I
Okay.
knew they liked me. And
Right.
I knew that this 25th. So at this point, I'm just turned 30 or 30. I just turned 31. So I'm young. They've been aware of me for a while. And I have kind of at this point established myself as one of the best local sports radio guys, right? And I'm trying to take that next step. Uh and the Fox Sports Radio guys the ESPN radio guy was super nice, but he's like, we don't have a job. Like, we
Mhm.
don't have an opening. Fox Sports Radio guys was really interesting. They were like, I haven't told this story in a very long time.
Yeah, no, I
They
love
were
this stuff. This is
they were
fascinating.
like, okay, so here's the deal. We are actually planning on making major changes at the network, but we're going to be in more partnership with Fox Sports One, the TV arm. Because Fox Sports Radio and Fox Sports, or now FS1, then Fox Sports One, are not owned by the same company. It's a branding agreement.
It's funny you say that. Sorry to interrupt you again,
Yeah,
because I'm still, and you can maybe explain this. And now with cable and
yeah,
YouTube TV and all this stuff, it is a bit confusing. I actually did a show, I believe, on Fox Sports One for it was for WPT at the time. It was called King of the Club. It was like a play money show where they made it like a
sure.
World Poker Tour thing. They did something, and Maria Ho and I hosted it. And I forget, it was like on FS1, I
Yeah, it's on
believe, but it's
FS1.
different
Yeah.
than Fox Sports. Like how does
No,
that work?
so so FS1 is part of Fox Sports, which is part of what we call Big Fox, the Super Bowl is on,
Yep.
and that
Yep.
is owned by News Corp, Rupert
Okay.
Murdoch's company, the
Okay.
same company that owns Fox News.
Got it.
Fox Sports Radio is owned by I I think it's, and in fact I know, is iHeart Media,
Okay.
iHeart Radio. They just have a branding agreement. So you know what I mean? So like they share, so they're partners, they have a branding agreement, but they are different corporate entities. You know what I mean? So like the radio arm and the TV arm are totally separate, different stock prices, different everything. They're different corporations, but they work together. And so the radio side said, and at this point in my life, let me add this, I've done zero television. I've
Okay.
done, I've been a guest on a few local shows, but I've done no TV.
When
They,
you to interrupt you one more time,
yeah,
on when you're a guest on TV, how big a difference is it? Is it like instantly where you go on as a guest and probably you're nervous, of course, because it's the first time kind of
yeah.
thing. But like, do you figure it out quickly? Do you do some studying? Like, how
So
do you
to
get
me,
into that?
my whole career was hosting 4-hour, usually solo radio shows.
Right.
You go on TV and it's like, hey, the segment's 8 minutes and there's 4 people talking.
Yeah.
So
Not very
it's
different.
easier from a knowledge and content standpoint. It's harder from a make your point quickly and concisely and cogently, and I'm a real fidgety guy.
Yeah, the
And
transitions, right? Like, how do you cue it? How do you finish so they know who does it go to? Do they throw it to you? Like, you wanna say
all of
something,
that
it's
is so
yeah,
different. So like if
yeah,
from a knowledge information base, if you can do a 4-hour solo radio show, you can do anything in that space. But just because you have the knowledge for it doesn't mean you're going to present well, doesn't mean
yep,
you're going to, all that stuff. So I done
yep,
no TV, and I was not trying to do TV. I wanted to be Colin Cowherd. I wanted to be the biggest radio guy in the country. And the guys at Fox Sports Radio tell me that that they are going to do more stuff where basically more of their radio shows are now going to be simulcast on TV. I don't know this at the time, but it's because FS1 has just agreed to terms with Colin Cowherd to simulcast his radio show, move it from ESPN to Fox Sports 1 and on Fox Sports Radio. I didn't know that, but because of that, what they said essentially was, we don't want to start any new radio shows that don't potentially have the upside of also being on TV. So before we make any major change, we want whomever we might hire to meet with the guy who's now going to be running FS1, Jamie
mhm.
Horowitz. And this is a convoluted, crazy story. And when they said Jamie Horowitz, I said, oh my God. 4 years ago, 4 years prior to that, I had flown to New York on my own dime to meet with Jamie Horowitz to try to get on ESPN television in some capacity. And when I got there, as I landed, I got a phone call from his secretary saying, Jamie can't meet with you today. Sorry. But so he owed me a meeting. And so I hit my agent up. And I'm like, hey, the Fox Sports Radio meeting went well, but they say I have to meet with Horowitz. He owes me a meeting from years ago. Can you make it happen? He's like, let me see. And he calls me back and he's like, so here's the deal. Jamie just started this job. He's not taking meetings, but he does know he kind of he owes you one. So if you want to come to Los Angeles on your own dime, he promises you he will meet for 15 minutes. Now, he promises he will not cancel. He also promises this meeting will be 15 minutes long. And I said, and I was in that moment, I was in Sacramento with my wife, with her family. And I told her, and God love her, she was like, tell him we'll be there tomorrow. We can drive down.
Well,
I was like, okay, so we'll do it. So we go to this meeting. And when you have a 15-minute meeting, you're just get right into it. I'm like, listen, man, I have one goal from this, that at the end of this meeting, you sign off on Fox Sports Radio hiring me. So ask me whatever you need to ask me. So I don't even remember all the things he asked me. And 12 minutes in, his assistant comes in and is like, hey, got your next thing. So he's like, walk with me. I'm like, okay. And he's like, all right. And so he can see I'm kind of looking like, are you going to make the call? And he's like, obviously, I'll tell them they should hire you. I was like, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is the whole idea. He's like, I just have one question for you. This whole time, why have you not tried to get me to hire you? And I'm like, because I've never done TV. I can walk into their office and tell them I'm better than their radio guys. I can't say that. He's like, do you think you can't do TV? I'm like, well, no, I think I can. He was like, I know you can. And instead of the radio job happening, they ended up flying me out for 8 auditions and then hired me to be a part of Colin Cowherd's TV show.
wow.
So,
That and
and,
it was
and
how
that's how it
shocking. So
happened.
you go to the meeting and you're thinking, man, I got impressed, or 15 minutes, and it sounds like, yeah, he almost was like he was ready for telling
He
you,
was
like,
into
yeah,
it,
it was
right?
that's a
And
crazy,
it was
crazy swing.
crazy. And then I ended up, because the world's weird. Once I started being on FS1 in the auditions, all of a sudden ESPN, which had previously told me we have no jobs, called me and said, we want to offer you a radio show in Los Angeles and weekly television appearances. And I ended up thinking, I'm like, oh, I'm going to take that job. That's, that is what I was hoping for.
Right.
I've never done like this. The Fox Sports thing's nebulous. It's a TV show, but the TV show doesn't even really exist yet. And my wife, to her credit, was like, don't do that.
Right.
Like Fox wanted you, ESPN only wants you because Fox wanted you. Go with Fox. And I did. And I worked, with Colin for 8 months. And then they offered me the show in New York. And we ended up going out to New York and starting First Things First. And one little addendum to the story quickly. Remember when I said Jamie Horowitz canceled the meeting on me and had me meet with someone else? The person he had me meet with was a producer he worked with named Kevin Wildes, who made television shows. And Kevin Wildes is now the co-host of my show. Wow. So that guy ended up, Wildes transitioned from producer to on the air. Yeah, he's the white guy in the picture right there. Yeah. And now he hosts the show with me. So yeah, so that's a half hour on my career.
I love it. That's exactly what I want. And Colin, you mentioned Colin, you've given him very high praise. What makes him, because he's been doing this for a long time, you said that you were saying he's the best. What attributes, like poker, there's all these different things, and any sport or anything, any field, what makes Colin so good? Why has he been
so it's the way his brain works. I mean, so Colin actually oddly kind of ruined a generation of broadcasters because they all try to do Colin Cowherd imitations and they can't do it. But his ability to start a sentence with, I'm going to tell you why when the Patriots had Jimmy Garoppolo and Tom Brady and there was the infighting. I'm going to tell you why the Patriots quarterback room is like LAX airport. And you're like, huh? And 8 minutes later, you're like, God damn, man. It is like LAX. Like the way he can draw those things in.
He'll throw some crazy statement out and then make it make sense.
And then make it make sense.
Right.
And the other thing that makes him is this is the only thing he could do. And I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean is Colin, for a long time, I would find out Colin had the day off from work once we became good friends, because I would get a random phone call around the time his show should be starting. And he would not say hello. He would not say, how are you doing? I would say, what up, Colin? And this is where he would go. So here's the thing. And he would just launch into a 10-minute rant on a phone call, because since he's off the air, he just needs, he has the need to get the opinions and the takes out. And you can't teach, you know what I mean? You can't teach that. He is one of one.
It's for what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's a wild kind of butterfly effect of events, and just sort of clearing tension and getting to where you want to do. So okay, so why New York then? So that's where they want to do the show. They want to produce.
So the show used to be, so the network's based in LA, but our show, it's called First Things First because it used to start at 6:30 a.m. Eastern. So it's been in the afternoons the last 2 years. But when it started, it was the lead-in to Undisputed with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp at the time show. And the idea, so you can't do a show that starts at 6:30 a.m. Eastern from the West Coast. And so because New York, Fox already had we're not in that studio anymore, but they had the studio space where Fox News is produced. That's where they put Chris Carter and I. And so it was me and Hall of Fame receiver Chris Carter. And then so we were in the mornings for 5 years, and the last 2 years we've been in the afternoons.
That's all. And how has that been, considering you were saying sort of California based, your wife, and how is being in New York? How have you liked that?
So listen, I really like New York. I think I'd probably personally like LA more. I did live in LA for a year when I first started with Fox, but it wasn't real because my wife and kids stayed in Houston. So I commuted LA to Houston on the weekends. So I didn't really get to embrace, Los Angeles. I'm there by myself and I'm commuting. But my kids love New York. My wife has a women's boutique here in Harlem called Trentage. If people want to check it out, a little trendy, a little vintage. It's actually where I do my
That's
podcast
awesome.
and
That's a
YouTube
cool
show
name.
from. Yeah, it's
I
a
like
really,
it.
yeah, it's spelled
That's
like
awesome.
vintage, but TR.
Right.
So she is a big part of the Harlem community. Her store is important here. What she has done as far as it is in my like essentially a luxury women's store for cost. Like, you know what I mean? She charges essentially what the items cost her. Like if you were to do
Yeah.
the actual margins, there aren't because the idea behind it is she grew up in a community in Sacramento similar to Harlem, where it's like women from this community should be able to dress for any event or anything however they want, even if they don't have a ton of money.
Right.
And so she really has put down roots here. And my favorite thing to do in the world, like I spend money on three things. Like my wife and kids get almost all of it. And then the rest of it either goes to gambling or to eat the single best food you can eat. Like it is my favorite. And so as far as New York City, I think is the best food city in the world. And so I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Kansas City. Do I miss having a yard? Do I miss, you know what I mean? It being easy to, I'm going to run to the store real quick. Sure. But I really do like New York, and the food here is so out of this world that it would be hard to like. Vegas has really good food. LA obviously has really good food, but I go places really other than that. And I'm like, man, I don't know how people eat. Like I've become very spoiled
Yeah.
on that piece of it.
Well, you sort of segued, and I know because I again, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is exactly the kind of stuff I love to talk about. But you mentioned gambling,
Yeah,
poker.
sure.
Tell me about this duel here.
Oh, I mean, this is one of the
Excuse me.
coolest but also kind of saddest moments of my life. So I remember that thing that I told you about, the encyclopedia that I made for Houston.
Yeah. Yep.
So I did the same thing to prepare to play Helmuth. He
Okay.
had 6 heads up matches already. He'd done 3 against Antonio, 3 against Daniel, this exact format.
How does I sort of just hopped right in
Yeah.
this because I do want to
Yeah.
talk about poker, how you got into it, all
Yeah.
that. But this particularly, so how this is like COVID time, I believe, or sort of it was. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a little later now. How do you go Negreanu, Antonio?
Oh,
How is
so
Nick
here's
Wright?
how did I
How
get
did you
involved?
get brought in out of all? Because you're not like a
Yeah.
household poker name, but people know you and you have a pretty
So I had I had become friendly with Doyle because Doyle watched a ton of sports TV, and Doyle tweeted about me once before I had ever spoken with him.
Okay.
And it was like the biggest thrill ever because this is, one of my poker heroes and so cool. I also had become friendly with Haralabos Vulgaris through sports and media and those things. And Haralabob sent me Brent Hanks info because I wanted to get on something on, some poker live
Yeah.
stream thing. And and Doyle kind of vouched for me. And so they brought me in for like 3 days of filming, 2 cash games, and one of those 10K sit and goes. And the 10K sit and go ended with me and Helmuth heads up, and I won. And I really and then we had some good moments between us, whatever it was. So then he beats, Negreanu and Antonio, and he keeps the way that high stakes duel was set up is if you win 3 in a row, you can quit.
Yep.
And I was like, and so I called Brent and I'm like, listen, I know this is going to sound silly. I was like, but why don't I play him next? I was like, if I beat him, it's unbelievable. He'll definitely re-challenge. Who knows? If he beats me, I'm not going to re-challenge. And it kind of resets the clock. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's not just because the goal of that thing was to get up to, $1 million match, but Phil kept beating everyone and winning. And
Right.
so I was like, I think it could be good. Like, let me, I can come up with the 50 grand. Let me have a chance. And so that's how I ended up getting the seat. And then so I'm a fan at this point now of Octopi Poker and what those guys are doing. And to be fair, I'm also, a tiny investor in that company. I don't want to be insider trading anything, but I also think one of the reasons I'm an investor is because I think it's such a great product. And I think Chewy and Victoria are brilliant.
I was just talking to Chewy about it. He's going to be. I'm going to have him on the pod as well coming up, and also I think
his
it's
stories.
I love that. He's an amazing guy.
You need to block out 3 hours for him, man.
No, yeah,
what a life. What a life.
He's just one of those guys that no one's got anything negative to say about him, and just sort of like gets it all.
He's a great human being.
Yep.
I got to know him down in Houston at Champions Club. We played together down there. But when the high stakes duel thing happened, I knew nothing about solvers. I knew nothing, I didn't have, there's no coaching, but what I had access to was how Phil played these heads up matches. And so I just charted every single hand, and I just did it by hand and did my own thing. And I'm like, he has no idea how I play. I know exactly how he plays in these spots. And I was like, I think I can beat him. And for 2 hours, I stayed exactly true to my plan, and I think it was 78,000 to 22,000, 77,000. I was in a really good spot. And then you will see why. So if you go to like 1/3 of the way in, and you'll see when I have, the big chip lead. But regardless, I'm in a spot where, but then you see why he's a pro and I'm not. And I think I got tired, and he also, whatever it is, I played really poorly then for 2 more hours. But then I claw back, and we are neck and neck. And if you want to scan to the last hand, it is so sick. Not because this is not a bad beat story. It's the hand. I'm now in a position where I think I can.
There might be multiple parts, I think.
This is right. Yeah, this is just 1 hour.
Right. So that's why. So you used to get a chip lead sort of towards the end. But
right. But regardless.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to tell a bad beat story, but it's just the emotion of it. So I've now clawed back, and now it's, I think, 60,000 Phil, 40,000 me. And the blinds are, 1,000, 2,000. You know what I mean? And so, and I have 6-8 of diamonds, and there's 2 diamonds on the flop, a diamond on the turn, a blank non-pairing card on the river, and the action doesn't totally matter. I have a, 8 high 2-card flush.
Yeah, heads up.
Heads up, and he bets the river. And I jam, and he tanks for 3 minutes. And I'm like, unbelievable. I'm like, this is great. I'm like, if he folds, I have the chip lead. And if he calls, I have the massive chip lead.
Right.
And so this is why it was devastating. So he finally calls, and I'm euphoric.
He's got slightly better flush.
He says meekly 9 high flush, and turns over 9-7 a diamond.
Wow, that's brutal.
And so it was like an unintentional slow roll. You know what I mean? Because I think any other player in the world is at that stack depth and, all of it. And by the way, when I shoved, I knew if I get snapped, I lose. But the moment I don't get snapped, I'm like, this is beautiful.
It's like Hustler Live last night. I know you said you watched some of this $1 million cash game. There was a hand like Jack 10, Queen 10.
Oh, Jack 10, Queen 10.
We're like, and he's tanking. And actually, for a second, I thought he might fold because he took so long, and it was so like that type of thing. And then when you get called, and you go from like a close spot to similar feeling. It's crazy. It's not really a nit roll, but it's like you get it.
And it's right. If Phil didn't do anything wrong,
right?
And maybe I slightly overvalued my spot. I don't really think I did, given all of it. But regardless, it was only that the emotional roller coaster of being, in those 90 seconds he's tanking, where I am so certain that if he worst case scenario is I have a slight chip
Yeah,
lead.
he's gonna fold
Best
you in the
case
pot. Yeah.
scenario is it's now 4-1 me, and instead it's over. You know
Right.
what I mean? Instead it's just over. And then Phil, God love him, and this is why Phil. This is why he's Phil. He then said, my wife was there. Ali and Maria are doing the commentary, and he's like, "Hey, we should all go to dinner." And I have just sat playing poker with him for 5 hours, and I'm devastated. But I'm like, okay, we'll go to dinner. And at dinner, because he's trying to be nice, he just tells me all the mistakes he thinks I made. And again, he's not
You're
trying to
screaming. Right, right.
needle.
He's giving you, like
He's honestly
like, yeah,
trying
yeah.
to be kind.
Right.
And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, I want to jump out of this building right now.
Yeah.
And so, but it was, also totally glad I did it. It got me more truly in the poker world. Phil and I are friends to this day. You know what I mean? Like, I've had a lot of cool opportunities because of it. And it was, nobody did anything wrong. It's just I wasn't prepared for the emotions of that moment, I think.
Yeah.
But I love, man. I've been
Phil really is. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and we're in like 19, 18 investments together, including, I forgot to mention at the beginning, the title sponsor, Karate Combat. Shout out to them, Austin, Texas. Tomorrow, I'm going to be there for that. There's a big event there, 46. Phil and I are involved, and we just did a stream for Hustler Live because I want to talk about Hustler Live, like with this $1 million game and your thoughts and how big this is. But we played a sit and go. Similar, you said you won the 10K sit and go versus Phil, right, in a poker go. In an arena there.
You guys just played one at Hustler.
Yeah, exactly. It was the exact same thing, similar thing. And he ended up bubbling fourth. I took it down, but it was some guys that literally didn't play poker. There was, like you said, you don't know UFC that well, but there's some UFC guys literally had never played poker. Bryce Hall, you may have played with some of these guys, but it was fun and it's great. I actually like the sit and go format. I think the audience prefers the high stakes crazy blood, right? But like, it's kind of fun to play a sit and go type
for sure
format too.
I like all of it. I like all of it. I don't know if there's a market for it.
Right.
I'd love for there to be televised, at least, it doesn't have to be $1 million stakes, but good stakes, round of each, round of no limit, round of PLO. I think that game really is one of the best action games because you're going to have people that are, just love PLO and you know what I mean? And aren't really up to date on no limit. And then the other way around. I love that format personally, but yeah, I mean,
let me ask you that. With Nick Wright, you got a free night to play poker cash game with friends or even a casino, or say you're in Vegas and you could hop in any game you want. What is your dream stakes and buy-in and format? I say, Nick, we're gonna go play poker in Vegas tomorrow night. Like, where do you want? What do you want?
I would say I would love to play if it's available. Round of each, round of no limit, round of PLO, and I'd love for it to be, again, if it's just like I would love for it to be 25-50 with a regular straddle on, and nobody is sitting deeper than 20,000. But to be clear, that's not like my typical, it's not like that's my home. But if you're asking me like my ideal game, that would be it. Like where we're not talking about, I don't like where it's like, okay, I can only play in this game if I sell off pieces of myself.
Right.
And
it's stressful.
It's
5-5. It's like, fine, have a drink, have a good time.
Yeah.
Friends, but you're not like, you want to feel it, but not be like so tilted that you can't go home and talk about it.
Exactly right. And you don't like and whenever I have been in a game where I, sold a piece, whether it was because I needed to or because just people wanted it, I don't feel totally mental clarity on, how I want to play. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, I'm accountable, in this spot, and so, but I find myself, so my regular game that I play in New York is a weird game because it's a 5-5 game, but everyone is sitting with between, 2 to 5,000. You know what I mean? So everyone's so
chips are flying. People are
right.
getting it's a deeper.
But it's not. I don't. I play. I need the game to be big enough to have my full attention while not so big that I'm nervous about the money. You know what I mean? And so a game that I'm playing in with $2,000 in front of me, all of a sudden I'm, very often instead of trying to play my best poker, I'm trying to just have like the most exotic move of the night. You know what I mean? Like like I want to call you with Jack High. Just
and I want to rip it in with
whatever it is.
Whatever bluffing
and so but on the flip side is the times when I've played games that were too big for what I could afford at the time, I also don't play right. You know what I mean? Because you're just, there's the right spot, like this is, but you're nervous. Or,
you don't want to hit that reload button for 50,000 to call the chips in, and you have to, and then you're worried.
And so, but I mean, I've been playing poker I'm 39. I've been playing poker for 30 years.
Yeah, so I skipped right into the juicy Phil Hellmuth 1v1, big stage. How did you? So something's playing with family at a young age. How did you find No Limit? And you prefer PLO? It sounds like you like PLO a lot now.
So I do. So I found it with my mom. I played like almost everyone's story. It seems like starts like this. My grandparents playing, with pennies, with them when I would go visit them in Florida. Kansas City, where I'm from, is huge gambling culture. There's 4 brick and mortar casinos within 20 minutes of downtown Kansas City.
Okay.
And so when I got back from college, in college, so I'm in college 03 to 07, internet
Syracuse.
poker boom, Syracuse.
So this is exactly when I started playing too, like online, the moneymaker
online
effect,
correct.
The rounders. You saw rounders probably right around then.
There's the moneymaker effect. There's rounders. Internet poker is essentially legal, or whatever it is, and I would just play like $30 sit and goes.
Party poker.
Party poker and poker stars. And I just remember playing these $30 sit and goes. Be like, man, I just want $180. I'm a college kid. Yeah. But the other thing with Syracuse is there was a casino. There's
Turning Stone.
Right.
I used Schenectady up there. When I was in college, I had a girlfriend from there, and I would go up there. And Turning Stone, I remember going to back same time. It was crazy. Like this is like that's so fun. You're young and you're going to this casino. It
was because it's I don't know if it still is like this as far as the rules, because it was a Native American reservation, and because they didn't serve alcohol, you only had to be 18
or 19.
18.
Yeah, that's right.
So we would drive to Turning Stone and play in, what I mean, real games. So I then in college got hooked up with these guys, real guys in Syracuse, and got in what was still to this day the greatest game I've ever played in, which was a 2-2 game on the south side of Syracuse that starting around 2 a.m, the local hustlers from the community would come in.
That's with local hustlers. I like that.
Would come in with $3, $4, $5 in a 2-2 game
and ready to fire.
And there was one guy who everyone called Rack because he left his chips in the rack and would just on his first hand he played just put the whole rack in a 2-2 game.
That's a cool nickname,
right? And so now, and that also, that game I got in. That was the first time I got in some real trouble gambling. I'll never go on credit. I'll only play with the cash in my pocket. But then, of course, that's not the case. And all of a sudden, at one point, I owe the game $1,000, and I'm in college, and I make $80 a week, and I'm in a bad spot. And these are the things you go through. And then I go back to Kansas City, and right after I got out of college, I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I won $50,000.
I had a note of this. I meant to add this. Pretty surreal. How'd that happen? I have so many questions. I want to rapid fire a few because I know we're going to get tight on time. But
no, I just saw it scrolling on the screen that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire auditions are at this car dealership until 5 p.m. and I'd always wanted to be on. And I went down, and you take a test, and then like the 50 people in the room, like 8 of us got a high enough score on the test to stay, and then they determine whether or not you'd be a good contestant. And I got picked, and I won 50 grand. And that 50 grand was essentially, my version of, I guess, poker coaching, because I then started playing every night in the casinos in Kansas City, and that was gone within a year. But you know what I mean? And so from that moment forward, I'd always played, but now I was playing in real games. You know what I mean? I had a bit of a bankroll, but not for long. I was 22 years old. And I just, I just love it. I love the competition of it. I love the strategy of it. And you asked me if I'm more of a PLO guy now. I just, there is a level of no limit. I don't want to say it's been solved, but it is closer to being solved than PLO. And the best guys at No Limit, let me put it like this. There's not a lot of terrible No Limit players the way there are still right now some terrible PLO players.
Right. Well, it's also the equities. The equities are, the equities run closer, so it gives more of an allure of like, oh yeah, it's gambling, but really like, yeah, the mistakes are, you can really play some really poor hands in PLO. The one thing I really was curious on your thought on is the NIL, because the NIL, I played soccer in college, not a money sport, right? Not one of the basketball or football, but with what's happening. And I just saw recently there's an update. So it was like NIL is available and this is going on, but now it seems like they're actually directly will be paying as sort of an update. What does that mean for college sports? If you give me like a quick version
I mean, I think that I don't think it's long-term good for college sports. I do think it's fair. Right. I mean, there's always been this weird thing where football and basketball pay for everything else. Everyone gets rich on it except for the football and basketball players.
Right.
And the majority of those guys are not going to make money in the pros. So I support it ethically. I don't think it will be good for the majority of college athletes, but I think that's we live in a capitalistic society, and the only people who haven't really been able to participate at all are young football and basketball players. And so I support them being able to get their money.
I mean, obviously it does introduce a ton of other issues and situations. And then you got kids that like at 17 or 18 getting money and stuff like direct, which I guess in the NIL kind of is happening with some of the top guys. But if like everyone starts getting handed money, that's like a whole nother, at college, who's responsible. I remember in college, I'd win a couple grand, in a tournament on whatever, and I'd buy a TV.
Yeah.
And like, so imagine just like handing kids that, just handing them cash.
Oh, I think listen, I think it's probably going to cause some problems, but I also think it was never fair to just say you guys are excluded. When I was in college, I made money doing radio, and nobody then told me I'm ineligible to, be a part of my student radio station.
Great point.
A buddy of mine wrote a book when we were in college. They didn't even kick him out of English class. Like, you're not an amateur there anymore. It was always bullshit. And it always rubbed me ethically the wrong way that the demographics, we have 2 sports that are majority black and majority kids from poor communities generating all this money. They get none of it. And then a majority white administrative and coaching class and then non-rev sports kind of live off the cream. And it's like, we're paying you an education, room and board, which is something, but it's not, but it's, so I ethically, I've always thought it was fucked, but I also don't think this is perfect, to be clear. Right. And I do think there's going to be some real, there's going to be some casualties of it.
For sure. I want to make, my dad always sends me questions for guests. I do want to get at least one. And he's born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a diehard Michigan fan. Obviously, just won national championship, was in Houston. That was cool. Football, Jim Harbaugh. He wants to know about your thoughts on him, your view of Jim Harbaugh. Is he a great coach or a flake? And how long do you think it will take if he will turn the Chargers around?
Oh, I think he will turn them around quickly. I think he is a great coach. I also don't think, I think it's probably, his tendency outside of Michigan is he burns incredibly hot for 4 or 5 years, and then players, it's hard for that. I think at college in Michigan, it was a little different because you get a new class in. You know what I mean? They're not hearing the same thing because they're only there for 4 years. But he's objectively a great coach, and he's got a really good quarterback in Herbert. And I think they're building it smart. They have the issue of they're in the same division as the greatest football player to ever live in Patrick Mahomes, and so that's going to be a tough spot for them. But I mean, they won 5 games this past year. That should never happen with the talent on that roster. And
yeah, the Mahomes Kansas City stuff. I know you're a huge. Obviously, that's pretty exciting to be born and raised there, and just what you guys got going. I mean, this could be a long time of a dynasty. I mean, will he go down as the greatest quarterback ever?
I mean, he's certainly on pace. I mean, he's played 6 years. He's won. Yeah, I mean, like Brady, who has the greatest winning resume ever, right? Brady played 21 seasons throughout his rookie year, because that's not fair because he didn't play. Played 21 seasons.
Won like 7 and 12 Super Bowls. Right. Something crazy.
Went to 10 Super Bowls. Won 7 Super Bowls, and went to 14 conference championship games. So he won a Super Bowl 1/3 of the time. He went to the Super Bowl 45% of the time, and he went to the Final Four 67% of the time. Mahomes, through 6 years, has won 3 Super Bowls, been to 4, and been to AFC championship games all 6 years. So Mahomes' percentages are 50% of the time wins the Super Bowl, 67% of the time plays in the Super Bowl, and 100% of the times in the Final Four. So he's pacing towards it. He also, in my opinion, is already the most talented player to ever play the position. So I don't think he needs 7 rings, but he needs more than 3. But if he gets to 5, and we'll see. I think he's the best player to ever play. He's also my pal, so I'm biased, but he's the best player I've ever.
He seems just like an incredible, like, just down to earth guy, just sort of fun, go lucky, and not really, like really humble.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and listen, a diehard sports fan, like, is the reason he and I are buddies is because, like, not talking about the Chiefs, talking about like the Dallas Mavericks, who he loves, you know what I mean, and those types of those things, like a real diehard sports fan, and a guy who. His dad says his best sport was basketball. He was drafted to play baseball, and a true, natural, brilliant athlete across the board.
Yeah, it's crazy. And LeBron, is he going to play with Bronny? Are they going to get together? Do you think this seems like there's some drama? It says he's only taking workouts from the Lakers and
so that part's weird. But that is less to me about LeBron and more about Clutch, the agency. So Rich Paul. Who I know really well and work with, to be clear, does things a little differently than a lot of agents and presses leverages of power, and it typically works out for his clients. I don't want LeBron to stay with the Lakers because I don't think they're well run. I do think he's going to stay with the Lakers, and I do think that, Bronny is going to end up. Bronny's definitely going to end up in the NBA. The only reason he wouldn't end up with the Lakers is if somebody drafts him before the Lakers have the opportunity to.
How much power does LeBron have? Like, is it in this type of situation? LeBron really has cemented himself. Like, I mean, he's like above. He's like I look at him as like the commissioner. Like, probably they run stuff by him. Like, almost like he's that powerful. Can he? Is it like kind of a known thing? Like, if he's like, I want to get him, like, because can he say, like, kind of, do people know not to draft him?
So here's the thing. I think that he has enough power that. If Bronny is on the board with the 55th pick of the 58 pick draft, the Lakers will take him. I don't think he would want to have a team, not like, if there's a team that wants to spend a better pick on him, that's better for, better for Bronny. I don't think he has LeBron necessarily has the power to steer him away from places, but agents do. You know what I mean? People steer guys to certain places all the time. But also, here's the thing, man. Giannis, all 3 of his brothers have played in the NBA because of Giannis. You know what I mean?
Right.
The Knicks a decade ago gave J.R. Smith's brother a roster spot to make Chris Smith. Like, we've never seen the father-son because no one's ever played long enough.
Has it
But
never happened ever?
never in the
Oh,
NBA.
wow. So that's I mean, it's gonna
No,
happen. It's gonna
because
happen.
nobody, right, because nobody's played long. Only 6 guys ever have played the year 21. So
Robert
in order
Parrish,
for it to
maybe that.
happen, yeah,
Yeah.
in order for it to happen, and only Vince Carter's played the year 22. In order for it to happen, you need a guy to play the longest they've ever played, also to have a kid pretty young, and to have that kid be great. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, so it's just
It's yeah,
you got to thread a needle that's in basketball almost impossible. It's happened in baseball, most
football.
famously Griffey Sr. and Griffey Jr. Football, I don't think it's happened simultaneous. I
Okay.
don't think
Yeah,
you
a
got
lot
a
of pedigree,
a
father
lot of
son, yeah.
pedigree, but not father son at the same time. And hockey, it happened with the Hulls, I think. I don't know enough about hockey, but I think Brett and Bobby Hull played at the same time.
Okay, and listen, Nick, you're one of those guys, but it's you make this so easy. I don't even have to do much here and ask. And I know you got to go soon, so listen, cut me off anytime. I'd love to have you on again, but I do, I do. There's so many interesting things going on in the world in sports and technology, and just like it seems like a crazy time. Also for poker, it seems like it's really booming and gaming. It's like a crazy time with
Yeah,
sports. There's Prize Picks and DraftKings and FanDuel, all these different ways to gamble and do stuff, and it's everywhere. It's in your face now. Do you think it's, again, cut me off this last question too
sure.
and tell
Yeah.
me how long we got? I know you got to go. Is it too much as someone who respects and likes gambling, or is it just inevitable because we're behind the UK and these parts of the world?
So here's the
Yeah,
thing. I think gambling should be fully legal.
yeah,
I also would feel a little bit better about it if you had to physically be at a location to do it. So the when it comes to sports, I think that the barrier to entry to sports betting is a little risky, being so low. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, and it is a weird spot because I obviously don't think it's strongly enough to be like, I won't be a part of it. You know what? But if
yeah.
I'm being totally honest, I think all of it being as easy as right here is potentially problematic long term in a way that, hey, it's totally legal, but if you want to bet on tonight's game, you have to get in your car and drive down to the casino to, or you know what I mean? Or even if
Yeah.
it's just, it doesn't even have to be a casino.
Yeah, like I mean,
Even
look
if,
in the UK, like every corner there are shops, there's spots. But to
right,
your point, this is like I remember back with poker in 2002, 3 or whatever. I'm in high school, and like party poker, for example, this is back 20 years ago. It was just simple as refer a friend. Like I was playing on there in my
yeah,
high school. I was on my dad's computer at till 4:43 in the morning when his alarm would go off at 4:44, and I'd be in mid
yeah,
hand, and I'd close the computer and run in and dive into bed because that I could get money and send back and forth and cash it off for a net teller. And now technology and kids and what, who know, at 8 years, 10 years old, they're on, they can make this, they can get money
right.
on,
So
they can use their brother's
like,
account. It gets kind of
I
wild.
that
It gets
that
kind of
part
wild.
is so you know what you said is even right. It doesn't even have to be a casino. It could just be a FanDuel or whomever kiosk at a bodega. Still, if you just had to physically get up, walk down the street, I would feel a little bit less uneasy
Mhm.
about the simplicity of right here, boom. And so I think that there might be some tightening a bit, but I don't believe in prohibitions. And I do believe that, like, you know what I mean? Consenting adults should be able to do basically anything they want. But I do think there's going to be I don't know what the full ripple effect's going to be, but there's going to be a ripple effect.
And how cool is it to do a show with your one of your sons here? Because I have a 5 and a 1-year-old, and just thinking about that type of thing, like that's got to be pretty
Oh, it's
incredible.
great. So so my son's my oldest, he's 25, and it's the coolest thing. And he lives in LA. He works for Fox in LA. So it's a way to like keep us,
Yeah.
it's super connected. Over the summer when he was moving to LA a couple summers ago, his younger sister, my older daughter, who's now 19, she did it for a summer with me, even though she's not a sports fan. She's kind of tease up the topics. So yes, I mean that is, and I do it for my wife's store. I do it with my kids. It's kind of like I don't have a family bit. If you own a construction company, it'd be Nick Wright and family, or Nick Wright and sons,
Yeah.
or whatever. You know what I mean? And you have something to pass down or work with them. My business isn't like that. So it's a cool connective thing. And it's a way, for us to, stay close and become closer, even as he's a grown man.
Yeah. And do I have 1 minute, 5 minutes, 2 minutes?
Yes.
What do we
Yeah,
got?
I've got 2 minutes,
2
literally.
minutes.
Yeah.
All right. So before we forget, WSOP, crazy now, move from the Rio. It's at Bally's, the Horseshoe even branded now, which was sort of it last year, was starting to do. It's a lot nicer, cleaner venue. Will you play this year? I know you played, I saw you in Bahamas, WSOP, where we got to catch up. What will you play?
So I will play something. I can't play the main because I just philosophically don't believe in buying into a tournament that I'm not available for the full turn. You know what I mean? And so the main, I'm not going to be like, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas for 3 days. I'm going to buy into the main and be like, oh, I'll be knocked out by then, even if I would likely be knocked out by then. You know what I mean? So the main I can't do this year, but I will come at some point. I hope to come for at least 2 weekends and play a couple tournaments. There's a few tournaments that I've kind of looked at on the schedule. I'm like, oh, this is a 3-day. I could do it. So I'll be there at some point, but I don't know what yet.
Do you ever do any stake? I know there's multiple options. Stakings I've put post on. I've been with since the beginning. Do you do any of that ever? Do you like to give fans a chance to have a little piece?
So I haven't played in enough tournaments to do that.
Yeah, but you could literally you could put up like in a 10. I know you like say a 10K or 25K turbo, like 1 or 2 day event, which seems like more sort of what you would want and make it interesting. You could literally say like cap it at $5 a person and put up like $2,000 worth of action.
Oh yeah,
I
would definitely do that. So I just played in the WSOP circuit thing in LA at the Commerce, but the only 2 real tournaments that I've ever played in are that one and the one you saw me at.
Right.
Every other tournament I've ever played in has been like, one of those, you walk into a casino, they have like the daily $200. But
it would be more like disclaimer, hey guys, I'm not a tournament player, but if you want to sweet for fun and
I think that would be cool. I think
audience.
I like the idea of like having people in that regard kind of being along for the ride. I think that'd be really cool. And I hope, listen, I hate to cut this short, but I hope we do this again, Jeff. This is fun.
We are gonna do it again, and I literally promise. Last question, one more for my dad, because he knows of you, and he's a diehard. Ann Arbor, Michigan State. I think he mentioned you're anti-Michigan State a little bit, or have some thoughts against them.
I think people think that because the anti-Michigan State because me and Draymond have issues. I'm not anti-Michigan State in general.
Did reference that. He did not anti-Michigan State, but he mentioned, he's a resident of Ann Arbor. He mentioned about Seth Curry, but but Draymond sort of like what's his sort of like antics
relationship with me and Draymond that I thought was going, like, I try to fix it because we have a lot of mutual friends, but then he does more crazy shit, and I have a television show that I have to talk about. Then he gets mad. So
it's funny you say that, because we have a lot of mutual friends as well, and I actually met him at the Warriors charity event for the first time and got to talk to him a bit. And I think he's a really likable guy. It is kind of wild. Some of these incidents are crazy. It seems crazy.
Insane.
And it is. It seems. And then he's got a podcast. He's on the major shows, and I like him. But randomly I'll see these like haymakers or fights. I'm like, man, this is kind of crazy shit,
Fine.
But all right, well, listen, Nick, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Please, everyone, give him a follow. Instagram, Twitter. You can see I guess if you were to tell someone you have the podcast, we didn't even talk about YouTube.
Oh, that's fine. Just What's Right with Nick Wright. If people want to follow it on YouTube, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can check out the TV show Monday through Friday from 3 to 4:30 Eastern, and we'll do it again. Thank you, Jeff.
Nick, appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Of course. See you.